What's up, family? Welcome to another episode of the Church Systems Podcast. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Henry. I'm the owner and founder of Simple Systems Consulting. And what we set out to do is that we want to help leaders grow the church without burning themselves out and without using complicated marketing strategies. And so, if you're a believer, a church leader, or an aspiring church leader, I want you to know you're in the right place because I believe here you can get the support, the help, and the wisdom that you need to really take the next steps in your life and in your ministry. All right. And today I've got something really good for you. So today is going to be a little bit different. Typically when I do an episode like this, I really just kind of grab whatever, strategy or system or unique thing I have that I think is right. Well, today you're getting something special. At the time of this recording, I just hosted our weekly coaching call. And in our coaching program, Church Systems Boot Camp, all of our members, the pastors and their team and their leaders, their deacons, their staff, whatever it is from around the country, they all come on. And once a week, we do a live coaching call. And what I'm about to give you is something that was really born out of the coaching call. In our coaching call, I think our program is a little bit different. And one of the reasons that our program is a little bit different is because I'm very thoughtful in really being sensitive to the people that God sends our way. And so it's not a cookie cutter kind of thing. It's really time where that I really spend trying to hear what is happening in their ministries, in their lives, and really seeking solutions to help them take the next step. And so this was kind of born out of that. And so today I'm going to give you something that I call the power of together. The power of together. And we're really going to be talking about this: how winning your team can help you win your community. All right, I'm going to let you know right now. I'm going to start this thing with a banger. So I'm going to let you know, just go ahead and, if you're taking notes, this will be something you want to listen to again. All right. So I'm going to start with this banger. You cannot win your city if you don't first win your street. And you cannot win your street if you don't first win your team. And so I was thinking about this because, I follow college football player. Like, obviously, if you've been following me, I was a college football player. I played at Grambling State University. I was an All-American. I really had a chance to have an absolutely amazing career when it comes to football. But now when I follow college football, I look at like your Deion Sanders and all the different things that are happening in the landscape of football. There's something new called the transfer portal. And the transfer portal has changed everything. It's changed everything because now, and here's the unique thing. It used to be that you spent all year in the background while you were coaching and even in season, you were preparing to recruit high school players, right? You're preparing to recruit high school players. Well, two different dynamics have now been added. Now, as you're recruiting and looking at high school players, you now also have the ability to recruit players from other teams, right? Because in the transfer portal, a player can say, hey, look, I want to leave, I want to go somewhere else, and they can go to another team, right? So you have to recruit other players. But there's another dynamic that people aren't talking about as much. And I think it's equally as important. If you're a coach right now, all year, you also have to be re-recruiting your own players. Because just like you can pull players from another team, other teams can pull players from your team. And I was talking to a coach, my brother, actually, about this. He's a defensive coordinator at a Division II program. And this is one of the things he was saying. He says, now you have to recruit your own kids all year. He says, so in addition to worrying about who's coming in, you have to be aware of who's going out. And so I want to say the same thing to you as a church leader. Not that we're in a transfer portal and not that there's this mad dash. In some ways it is, people are bouncing around and moving around. But I'm speaking to your awareness of the value of the people you already have. And I know they may not always be what you need to get to the next level, and they may fall short in a bunch of different areas. But what you really discover is that, and what I really want to prove to you today is that there really is a lot of value in taking care of the team you have in lieu of whatever it is God might do in the future. Right. So in the next about 30 minutes, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to give you a simple framework for building team unity. I'm going to show you how to build unity in your team so that you win that team. Right. Again, using the college football analogy, I've been watching Deion Sanders. And the thing I'm most really impressed by is just how encouraging and how he builds his players. He's taken the players that he has and he's building them up, and they are performing at an amazing level right now in his first year at the program. And so I'm going to give you a simple framework to do something similar to really begin to build a team that makes a difference. All right. So here's where we need to start. First thing you need to know is that Jesus cared deeply about the unity of his disciples. Jesus cared deeply about unity. So much of, if you want to know what Jesus's heart was about different situations and so on and so on, there are two things you look at. Look at his sermons and look at his prayers. When you look at those two things, a very clear picture is painted, is that Jesus saw the value of unity. When he could have prayed, like, Lord, I pray that they would have the biggest church in the world. I pray that they would just go conquer everything. Like, he didn't pray any of that. He prayed that they would be one as he and the Father were one. He prayed that because he knew that, man, if we can get unity, we can do anything. Let me prove it to you. Genesis 11:5 and 6, scripture you've probably seen before, around the Tower of Babel. But look at what God says as he looks down on them. He says, nothing, they're on the same page, they're united, they're speaking the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. Now, in this case, they're trying to use their divine authority for a secular cause. And so as a result, that's a violation, right? There's a violation because, now they're trying to do something that is not in alignment with the will of God, but they're trying to use the ingenuity God gave them to do it. And so, the story that their language is broken up and things of that nature. But look at the principle here. The principle here is clear. God identifies if people are united, they're speaking the same language, they're on the same page, nothing will be impossible. And that's why I believe Jesus prayed this prayer. He says, I pray that they would all be one, just as you and I are one. He says, I pray that they'd all be one. Why? Because he knows if the church would be united, if we would all be one, there's nothing that would be impossible for us. And so this is why in the book of Acts, we get the coming of the Holy Spirit, and we get this moment where all these people who speak different languages for the first time in a very long time, they begin to hear one thing being said, but they all hear it in their own language. So the language is unified again. They're all in one place on one accord. And here comes the Holy Spirit like a mighty rushing wind, and 3,000 get saved. And so, again, Jesus saw the value of unity. And so, if we too can see the value of unity, then we position ourselves in our churches to really do something impactful. All right. So, let me show you the framework. All right. So, here it is. I want to give you 3 ways to build togetherness on your team. All right. Now, a lot of what I'm going to share with you is going to be a conflation of what we see in Jesus's ministry, what we see from Jesus in his preaching, his prayers, his living, things of that nature, his practicum. But also, I'm going to share some personal experience. And I love to draw on my first experience as a pastor because it was very raw. It was really, man, this feels so odd to say, but I guess this is a very honest and vulnerable moment. I feel like the first time I was a pastor, when I was a church planter, um, I blindly believed whatever the word said. And I didn't need to hedge that with my education. I didn't need to hedge it with comparison to other people. It wasn't tainted by the thoughts of how will people respond. Um, you know, what are people going to say? Like, none of that mattered. And so as a result, when I was convinced that God was in something and God was leading me a certain way, and that he was leading our team a certain way, and I was clear on what his word said, it didn't matter. My opinion didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. Others didn't matter. It was just like, all right, let's go where God's calling us to go. Now, if you have a biblical reason for disagreeing, I'm all for listening because I'm okay with being wrong with that. But one of the things I'm not going to do is violate the word of God. And so I often refer back to that experience because it was the first one and it was so raw. But these are also things that I've seen and that I've done throughout my life in ministry, and I've seen in others. All right. So I'll share them with you. All right. 3 ways that you can build togetherness and you can build unity on your team. Let me give you this real quick before I say this. It is so important that you really grab this. You really got to grab this. And the reason you got to grab this is because if your team is divided, then man, your church is in trouble because what's in the core is going to be in the fruit. What's in the seed is going to be in the fruit. And this is why you have to press for this togetherness. And when I talk about togetherness, I'm talking about building a team that moves beyond we just have meetings together and we do work together to actually getting into we know each other, we like each other, we care about each other. All right. Because that's important. All right. So, three things that help people and help teams build togetherness. Number one, shared encounters is that you want to create moments. When I use the term encounters, I'm talking about these spiritual experiences. Okay. You want to create shared encounters where the people who are on your team can experience God together. Super, super important. The disciples, I believe that their future ministry will become so important and will become so rather impactful. It's because of the moments, the encounters they had with Jesus. They had encounters with him in private that fueled all the things that they could do in public. I would argue that if they don't see Jesus, if they don't have an encounter with him where he comes in and he says, touch my hands, feel my hands, where if they don't have an encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, if they don't have an encounter with Jesus when they go out and fish all night and catch nothing, if they don't have these encounters with Jesus in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, where they see him ascend into heaven, if they don't have those encounters, they don't have the wisdom, the strength, or the faith that they need to do some of the things that they would do later. I truly believe those encounters made all the difference. And so, what you want to think about is how are you helping people, your team specifically, have these unique spiritual encounters? This is so important. One of the big mistakes that we make as leaders is that we assume that the people close to us got it. We think that just because they're close to us, the stuff that's on us rubs off on them and they just catch it and they just go. And the truth of the matter is, so many of the people who sign up and agree to be leaders in the church, some of them do so because they believe that walking in close proximity to the God chosen leadership will mean that they will have an extra layer of support, an extra layer of coaching, of training, whatever you want to call it. They believe there's going to be more, not less. And unfortunately, in many churches, what we do is when people get close to us, we assume that they're good. When the truth of the matter is, we should be checking on the close more than we check on the far. We should be checking on the close more than we check on the far because, really, in a biblical model, I disciple those who are close, and then those who are close begin to disciple those who are far. So, why Paul said, take this truth, entrust it to faithful men who would entrust it to faithful men who would entrust it to faithful men, right? It starts close. Here I am. I'm giving it to you. Now you pass it down from generation to generation. So what does shared encounters look like? All right. So here are three simple ideas for shared encounters. All right. Number one, one of the ways I've done this in the past is through in-home meetings. So literally, we used to host our leadership team meetings at our in our apartment, and it would we would have these moments of intimacy where people could really have an opportunity to see us as people. It's a struggle, and this is especially true in the Black church. It's a struggle because there is this reverence that we have for our leaders in the African American church, and sometimes that reverence leads us to believe that they're not people like us, right? We think that they're almost impervious. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes as leaders, it's our fault because we really fight to make everything look easy, right? We don't want to be a burden. We don't want to always look like we're complaining and we're struggling. And so we do things and we make it look so easy. And so with these in-home meetings, one of the things that I would do is that I would have our team over and we would, be in a very casual setting, right? So literally I'd be in, whatever lounging clothes, some sweatpants, my socks, shoes off. It's four people sitting on the couch, two people on the ottoman, three people on the love seat, some people sitting on the floor. We sit in a chair that we brought out the back. Like it was this comfortable, kind of organic type environment. But the way that we kept it so strong and professional is the content. The climate and the setting was comfortable, but the content was so valuable that it kept us focused on what we were called to do. And so in those in-home meetings, we got a chance to really walk closely and we got a chance to see like, hey, you're part of our family. And so we would have meals and they would see us interacting with our families. And I remember being in those meetings with one of my daughters sitting on my lap and one of the other leaders was holding one of my other daughters in. And it was family. And we were letting them see, man, we trust you. we're bringing you into our home. We're bringing you close. And I tell you, man, it broke down a barrier that was different. And I didn't realize how powerful that was until hindsight. Like I really didn't. And so I'm telling you, having those moments are super important. Another thing that was very important was private prayer gatherings. You need moments where you allow, well, let's go back this. The disciples eventually they catch on to Jesus's strategy. They began to notice that before these powerful moments of ministry in his life, he steals away to pray. And so eventually what they say to him is like, Lord, teach us to pray. Lord, teach us to pray. And by then they probably asked him all kind of things, but they finally come around and they go, Lord, teach us to pray. And so what I'm saying in these moments of prayer, in these private prayer gatherings, really what you're doing is that you are pulling back the veil and you're getting in the mud with the people that God has called to lead with you. You're getting in the mud with them, they're getting in the mud with you. And so for us in these private prayer gatherings, I would say to our leaders, hey, look, when I tap your shoulder, it's your turn to go and pray, and you pray until I send somebody to relieve you. And we never had a conversation about, hey, who's comfortable praying out loud and who's okay with praying this way and who's okay. We never talked about that. Can you pray for longer than 5 minutes? Can you pray for this? We never talked about that. We just went and we just prayed. I remember one night for prayer night, I tapped one of our leaders, and her and her husband are leading the ministry now, but I tapped her to go and pray. And I think she probably thought, man, in 5-10 minutes he gonna send somebody else to come. And she got to going, and I just felt the Holy Spirit saying, let her go. And literally, she stayed up there praying for 30 minutes. And I'm gonna tell you what was so powerful about it is that it pulled something out of her she didn't even know she had. Like you could literally hear the moment that the dam broke open. And she went from just kind of running down the list of things in her mind, and the spirit took over. And then all of a sudden, it was just she was on the ground, praying in the microphone, crying and going through and blah, blah, blah. And the whole atmosphere of the room shifted. Right. But it was in that private moment. It was in that private moment of prayer. It was in that moment of going forward. I tell you, man, if you don't do these kinds of things, if your team is not willing to follow you into an environment where they can go deeper spiritually, where you fast together, you pray together, you're going into battle with unproven soldiers. And you'll probably discover what that means in the future. But it's really important that you create those moments, right? Third things is times of personal ministry. It's so important that you don't forget that those closest to you, those at the top of the organization, if you would, the top of the organism, those at the top of the church, those who have the responsibility to lead, are part of the leadership team, staff, elders, whatever it is, they need ministry too. It is so important that you don't forget that. They need ministry too. I think in recent history, and I look over the last, year or two of my life, one of the most impactful times of ministry that I shared was with a guy in our church who was older than me, more life experience than me, um, great status in life, pretty wealthy, just all kinds of stuff. And in a moment, we were sitting in the car after lunch, and the Holy Spirit just had me to minister to him about what he was going through. And it was just a powerful thing. It was a powerful thing, man. And this guy went on to become one of my greatest supporters and somebody who really encouraged me and helped us a whole lot in ministry. But I think so much of it came from moments of personal ministry. Please do not neglect those closest to you. Don't assume they got it, because if they're walking close to you, the darts that the enemy can't get to you, he throws at them. Some of those darts they take for their leaders. And if you're a support leader, if you're on a staff, you're following the senior leader, it's important that you be aware that you still need ministry. And so you need to be open to receive. You still need ministry. You still need to be poured into. You still need someone to come alongside you and be there for you. Very recently, we made a connection with some leaders, man, and I tell you, it was the most liberating thing in the world for me for a moment to be in a space where I could receive ministry and not just give it. And so this is one of the things, right? So if you want to give people shared encounters, here are three things you can do. host team meetings in an intimate environment where you can really be there with people, walk with people. This is one of the things we cover in our boot camp. We give you the entire blueprint and we tell you how to do it, how to run it, the whole nine. You want to host private prayer gatherings and you want to do personal times of ministry. All those things help you create shared encounters. All right. Number two, the second thing you can use to build togetherness is shared experiences. I learned this as an athlete, as a football player. One of the things that made a team gel together so quickly is shared experiences. All right. I'm gonna tell a real hood example right here, but you get my heart, right? You get where I'm going with this. I remember one night, this was going into my I think this is going into my sophomore, my freshman, my redshirt freshman year, where I'm actually playing on the team. Um, and I remember we had gone through summer camp, man. It was a grueling camp. We had worked really hard. We were doing all the extra stuff, everything. And at the end of camp, school was back in, but it was before the season started. And we all decided we was going to a party together, right? Now, when the whole football team go to a party together, I mean, it's cool if you're on the football team. If you're not on the football team, and you feel some type of way about football players, it's not a good situation for you, right? So, anyway, we go to the party, right? And we hung out, we had a good time. We only had one incident. One of our crazy linebackers got to fighting, but then by the time all the rest of us ran up, the other folks ran away, and it was done. So I didn't have to get involved in the scuffle, right? But here's the point that I'm making. After that night, the next week, one of my teammates was just sitting around. He was talking. He said, "Man," he said, "I'm gonna tell you how I know we're gonna have a good time this year." He was like, "Man, when we went to that party together," he was like, "That's different, man." He's like, "I've been on teams where guys didn't hang out at all, and we just came out of camp and we said we going, and pretty much most of us went." And I remember thinking, like, bro, like us going to a party together, like, what does that have to do with anything? Shared experience. That's why Fortune 500 companies take their people on a retreat and they make them do high top tree courses and they make them do exercises together. They make them do trust falls. Why? Because shared experiences help fast track relationship. Now, here's one of the things to grab because this is important. When I say that shared experiences help fast track relationships, it either does it in a good way or a bad way, right? It helps further relationships that are going to be strong and solid, and it exposes relationships that won't be. And shared experiences has a way of doing that. Jesus did this. And when I talk about shared experiences, here's what I want you to think about. If you're a senior leader, I want you to think about challenging situations that your leaders have to go through without you. That they have to go through without you. And I'm not saying that you have to be apart from it, but it has to be, they have to carry responsibility. They have to take ownership of these moments. And in those moments, they come up together, right? So let me show you an example of what I mean. All right. Three things. Number one, give your team ownership of meaningful projects. All right. I was laughing about this earlier. I remember years ago. This is probably about a week before the Halloween season. We didn't celebrate Halloween, so we always did like a fall festival or something like that. And so this particular year, we didn't have any money. We were a young church plant. I think this may have been in our first year. And so we were at that point where we had a lot of people attending but not giving. Okay. And so we didn't have any money and we didn't have any resources, we didn't have nothing. And I remember calling our team together. I said, "Hey, we're gonna do a fall festival." I said, and I said, "I want us to really make it good. I want us to just have something great that people can come and enjoy and be a part of, and so on and so on." Right. And they looked at me like, "What's it?" I'm like, "We don't have no budget." I said, "I don't have nothing." I said, "Everything we need, y'all got to figure it out." I said, "As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go home because I've been working like, 60, 65 hours a week and I'm tired, but I need y'all to figure it out." Right. And I gave the project that I left. Man, I was a little crazy back then. Like I told you, I was raw back then. And so I just left. And I remember their look on their faces like, what did he just like? What is happening? Right. So I left. But anyway, I come back the day before the fall festival and I walk in the church and there are games everywhere. And the reason there are games everywhere is because our team has found materials from I don't know where they got it from, but they made games. Like I distinctly remember one of ours, Ketaloo, he's like my assistant pastor. he made Plinko. Like you seen Plinko on The Price is Right, where you drop the little thing, 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 and the little puck goes around and lands in the money. He made that. Like somehow he got like some plywood and nails and a ping pong ball and some red cups at the bottom, and he created Plinko. Right. And I just remember like laughing because they made games. They somehow got food donated and somebody from the church cooked it. They called the fire department and had them bring out a fire truck so that the kids could get on the fire truck and see the fire truck and all this kind of stuff like that. Like they did all these different things. And it was a meaningful project, right? And they were probably a little mad at me because, I really stretched them in it. But man, that was one of the most effective teams I've ever had. Like they were get it done mindset people, but it was because of their shared experience. They had gone through enough things. And I believe this is what Jesus did with the 12. I think he allowed them to experience enough things, even down to the three. He allowed them to experience enough craziness so that whatever they faced in ministry, nothing would shock them. I mean, imagine being Peter, James, and John. You go up on the mountain with Jesus and you see him transfigured. Like you see his appearance changing your face, and then all of a sudden, here go these two heroes of the faith who show up, and Peter's like, okay, we need to build a monument up here, right? Imagine being in the Garden of Gethsemane and you see the Son of God crying out before his Father, saying, man, if you could take this away from me, please do it, but not my will. And then you fast forward a little while and you see what he goes through and go like, oh, he went through that willingly. Imagine being the three and you go into the house of Jairus' daughter and you see that this girl is dead. People are crying, people are weeping. And calmly enough, Jesus goes in, he closed the door and he tells the girl to get up, like, hey, look, y'all take care of her, feed her something to eat, whatever it is. Like, imagine seeing that. What you gonna see in your life that scares you? What are you gonna see that scares you? And I think this is true. We cannot be afraid to allow our leaders and put our leaders in challenging situations. Ministry is challenging. And what I see, unfortunately, is I see a ton of pastors and church leaders who carry the burden of leadership by yourself because you're afraid or too concerned about putting your leaders in tough situations. You need to give them ownership of meaningful projects. And sometimes you replace the word meaningful with challenging, and sometimes you replace it with the word impossible. But you need to give them ownership and you need to let them know this has to be done. This needs to be done. But I'm leaving it to you to figure out how to do it. All right. So you need to get the ownership. That's his shared experiences. I never forget. I think one of the reasons, again, as a football player, one of the reasons that our coaches they ran us so hard when we did conditioning and stuff like that is they want us to be in shape, yes, but they were giving us shared experiences. They were making us fight together. All right. You ever meet two guys who were in the military together, went into battle, went to war together? It's like, man, the respect and the honor between those guys is nothing. Like, even today, if I see a teammate that I battle with, went to war with, I don't care if I ain't talked to him in 20 years. It's just like it happened yesterday. All right. It fast tracks things for you, makes a difference. All right. Second thing is missional assignments. You need to think about how you can give your team assignments to go on mission together. You need to give them assignments to go on mission, meaning that you need to put things in front of them where they go together. The way Jesus did this is that he takes the 72, he sends them out two by two. Even the disciples, he sends them out. And there's one time they come back saying, hey, man, we cast out demons in your name. And they listen, they had to obey us, right? There's another time they go out and it doesn't work, right? And they go like, hey, why couldn't we cast some of the other ones out? Why couldn't we cast this one out? And Jesus is like, well, this one come only out by, fasting and prayer, right? But they went on missional assignments. You've got to put things in front of your people, in front of your leaders to challenge them to be on mission. Man, I tell you, I see something real disturbing in some parts of the church is that people really think that they can change the mission to fit their personality and their own comfortability. And it's just that ain't the Bible I read. The Bible I read doesn't say do this if you feel comfortable. It doesn't say do this if it fits your personality or if you're in the mood. It just gives us a mandate to fulfill. And I know we all have different gifts and we have different ways to execute and all those kind of things. But too many of us are in churches that are missing gifts and we're not willing to adapt and adjust. If I look at myself on the fivefold scale and I look at the fivefold as functions, not titles always. And so when I talk about fivefold, I'm talking about functions, talking about like the way we see the world and what we do. In that model, I'm going to be on the apostolic end. But guess what? Whenever the Lord sends me into a church that is highly apostolic and prophetic, you know what I default to? A pastor and a teacher, right? I fill in the gap of whatever is needed in that moment, right? And that's one of the things that we've got to challenge our people to do. We've got to challenge them to go on missional assignments. Do you think everybody in the 72 was an extrovert? I doubt it. The chances are very low. It's probably 50-50. And yet they all went. Maybe that's how he did it. Maybe he matched up an introvert with an extrovert. Maybe he matched up a loudmouth with somebody who was real quiet. I don't know. But here's what I do know. They went out on a mission. And so you got to give people missional assignments, challenge them to take those next steps and go out into what God's called them to do. Last one, because I want to get on through this, is personal partnerships. Uh, if you want to create these shared experiences with your team, you need to make them spend time together. And it sounds so weird because these are not children, these are adults. But listen, you have no idea how many church teams never have a conversation outside of church. They never talk to each other outside of church. And so one of the things that you do to help this, and it's okay. Sometimes there's a generational divide, there's a cultural divide, there's stuff. People got all kind of stuff going on. People work, they got kids, all this kind of stuff like that. One of the things that I used to do is I used to create what I called a relationship matrix. And basically I would partner up everybody on our team with somebody else on our team every week. And over the course of that week, their responsibility was to have at least 2 5-minute conversations with that person. That's it. 2 5-minute conversations. Now I knew if they did the assignment and they really did it, it would go beyond that eventually. But I would just make them just say, "Hey, look, this is who you need to talk to this week," and I would participate. I would be in the matrix too. So I had somebody I was assigned to, and I would spend time with them, talk to them, sometimes go to lunch, coffee, whatever it is, right? But the goal was to get them to spend that extra time together. And so you can consider doing something similar. Like you say to these people on your team, "All right, here's your match for this week. Get your match. I want y'all to spend y'all to talk at least 5 times. I mean, for 5 minutes, 2 times this week, whatever it is, right?" And here's the thing now: if you do this, you got to hold people accountable to it. And so I give that out, and we come to that meeting. I say, "All right, everybody talk to that person this week. Who didn't talk to that person?" And they raise their hand. They raise their hand, and we hash it out right there. Why? Like, what does it mean that you couldn't spare 5 minutes for somebody that you love? Why? Well, I just. And sometimes I tell you that exercise will help us discover discord before it get out of hand. It will help us uncover it, and it would give me the opportunity to go and deal with it, and go from there, right? But the whole idea was shared experiences. You want to put them in spaces where they have to grow together, where they have to evolve together, where they have to take next steps together. All right. Last one. All right. So yeah, shared encounter, shared experiences. Number 3 is shared exposure. This is where you want them to see things together. All right. I alluded to this before. The 3, Peter, James, and John, they go up on the Mount of Transfiguration into the house, in with Jesus when he raises up the dead girl, and they come further and closer in the Garden of Gethsemane. They get those 3 experiences. And I believe that those 3 could operate in a different way together because they all had that same experience. Even if you just look at the disciples, they're on the boat when Jesus comes walking by and Peter walks on water. They're on the boat with it. That's a shared experience. They saw something nobody else saw, but that's also the reason that they were so equipped to share the gospel later on because of the experiences that they had, the exposure that they got, right? So you want to have shared exposure. So simple ways that you can give your team exposure, all right? And we're going to get a little heavy right here. So, because I want to really speak to you as a senior leader or an aspiring senior leader, I really want to speak to you here because I believe what I'm going to share with you is going to free you from so much frustration if you receive the healing that comes from it. All right. So, a couple of ways that you can create shared exposure. Number 1 is trusted voices, right? And this is just, I mean, what it sounds like. It's literally having someone else who can say, uh, speak into your team, and you trust their voice, you trust what they bring. Because our teams are sometimes like our kids. We can say something to them all day, but it is helpful for them to hear it from another voice because it gives another context to it. It helps them take another step, and it can just mean something. And so it's just one of those things, super simple, but also super impactful, right? So you want to think about who are the trusted voices that you could allow to speak into your team. All right. I spoke at a conference recently, and we had a pastor who actually took my message from the conference and played it as his Wednesday night Bible study because he trusted my voice and he knew what I was sharing in that video. So he shared it with them. Right. So you can do this virtually, digitally, but also it takes nothing to have a friend from across the country that you trust to jump on a Zoom call and speak to your leadership team. As a matter of fact, for churches in our boot camp, they get one of those meetings from me every month if they want it, right? They got a calendar, they pick a day, and I come on and I teach their team. They tell me, hey, look, here's where we are, here's what we need, here's what I need them to see, what I need them to learn. Can you teach on this? I go in, I teach on that topic for 30, 45 minutes from wherever I'm at. Sometimes I do it from a hotel, sometimes I do it from out of town, sometimes I do it from wherever. But I'm a trusted voice in their life, right? So, who are the trusted voices in your life who could come and reiterate and reinforce what you're teaching your team? All right. Second thing is retreats and conferences. And this is a big one. You want to create space where you get alone and you can really get in deep with your team. Super important. You want to create space where you can get in deep with your team. Many years, we went to the International Pastor and Leadership Conference hosted by Bishop Jakes, went to C3 Conference hosted by Pastor Ed Young Jr., Grapevine, Dallas, Texas. And we would go and it would just be absolutely amazing. Right. And I was all on it. So we registered for that conference. By the time we get to the conference, I have an itinerary put together. So I let every leader know, hey, look, here are the sessions I need you to go to, to make sure you dialed in on this. It's your job to take notes and come back and bring a report to everybody. Because you know what? I know they're going to try to sell that conference for $259 at the end, but we ain't got it. We spent everything we had to get the van and the drive down here. So take good notes, right? So you can teach it to the rest of us, right? But literally every night we would debrief in the lobby or in the restaurant or the hotel until they made us leave. And we would sit there and talk like, okay, what is God saying? What is God doing? And it was always an amazing thing. And I'll tell you this, two things always happened when I took a team to a conference. Number one, we always lost somebody. Every single time. Going into that conference, getting more clarity about what they were called to do, seeing what we were trying to do on a grander scale. There was always at least one person who came back and said, nah, this ain't for me. I ain't ready to live at that level. I'm not ready to make that level of sacrifice. And we blessed them. We say, okay, cool. Look, you can be a volunteer or you could just be a member, whatever. That's okay. Right. Because my policy was this is that I'm not willing to hold back the thoroughbreds just because there's one goat in the bunch. No, too many churches put a muzzle on the thoroughbreds because the goats are making a lot of noise. And that just wasn't my policy. And it was like, hey, look, if this isn't for you, that's okay. This is who we are. We move fast, we run hard, we believe in what God has called us to do. We've seen the winds of it. We've seen too many souls come to Christ to slow down and to stop for anything short of the Lord telling us so. And so that was one of the things that happened. But the other thing that always happened is we always grew. Whenever we came back with something that challenged us forward. And this is important. And this is going to go into our last one. And this is where we're going to get a little heavy. Um, Pastor, bishop, leader, apostle, whatever title you carry, like, listen to me. Your people don't know church like you do. They don't know the reality of what's happening out there in the church world. They don't know. So you could have something special brewing in your church and the people not be aware because they've not been anywhere else. They're not reading the research from Barna. They're not following Outreach Magazine. They're not reading churchleaders.com. Like, they're not going on those things and being aware of what's happening in and around the church. They're just not doing it. And because they're not doing it, they don't see through the lens that you see. And so conferences is a way of exposing them to see that what's happening in our church is not the end all be all of the world. Like, there are different things that we can do. There are different levels that we can go to really really go hard in doing whatever it is that God's called us to do. All right. Which leads me into my third one, which is we reviewed case studies and research. Pastor, one of the things that's frustrating you is that you're hoping some of the people around you get it, that they understand, that they come alongside you, and that they do all these different things. And the truth of the matter is that they won't, because they're not thinking that way. They're not experiencing what you're experiencing. And so one of the responsibilities you have is to expose them to the truth of what's possible, but also to the truth of where you are right now in the present. Right. So I'll show you a little example of this. We're joking about this earlier with my wife, because she still has the binder from back when we planted the church and we had all of our vision, and we would create a binder for every meeting, and we would load it up with documents and all this kind of stuff like that, give it to the leaders, and then get it back and refill it, all that kind of stuff like that. But every week in that binder, I would put articles from what was happening in and around the church. This was probably about 13 years ago now, but I distinctly remember I gave them an article, and the title of the article was, "Are we for, with, or against the gay community?" Right? That's what the article was. And I gave it to him because I had been reading around, I've been studying. I was like, okay, I'm starting to see this. And at the time, one of my mentors at the time was Pastor Tim Ross. And Pastor Tim Ross had me and a couple other guys in a mentorship group, and he had shared something with us about this church somewhere that was very openly gay. Right? It was a thing. They were ordaining people, and it was a lot of people in there, and they branded themselves as a gay church. Right? And so it was a thing. And so one of the things that he was basically saying to us is that this is something you need to prepare for. And so I've been studying it, and so I exposed our team to it, and I said, all right, I want y'all to read this article, and when we come to the meeting, we're going to talk about this during our development time. So be prepared to respond. So they came in and we talked about it. We talked through it, and we found out, came to the right solution, what the answer was, all this kind of stuff like that. But my point is this, is that, and then here's what's crazy. I don't even know if it wasn't even a year. It wasn't even 6 months. I don't think a same sex couple came to our church, and they came to our church. And the first time they came, I saw them. I spoke to them just like I spoke to everybody else. I ain't say nothing. I left it alone. I was like, all right, cool. Y'all come on in. God bless you. Blah, blah. Second time saying that. By the third time, they pulled me to the side at the end and they said, I just want to say thank you. And I said, for what? They said, not a single time have you made us feel like outcasts and made us feel like we didn't belong, because clearly you could tell, we're a couple, but nobody, even the leaders, man, nobody made us feel crazy. You know why? Because I exposed them ahead of time. I exposed them ahead of time. All right. Here's another one. And this is a big one, Pastor. Another thing that I exposed our team to is I found this article by H.B. Charles. It was on churchleaders.com, and it was called How the Pews Can Help the Pulpit. And basically, it was, how can the people help their pastor? And he laid out like these 7 things, pray for him, give him time to study, um, you know, care about his family, just all kind of different stuff. But I gave that article to our team, and I said, let's talk about it. And I realized something very important in that conversation. Because I made things look so effortless, they genuinely thought that there was nothing I needed. They thought there was nothing I needed, because they just they just thought, oh, he good, he chilling, he straight, right? And so I need you to understand that. Like, that's so valuable and it's so important. One of the things that's unfair is for you to expect your people to operate in a way that you have not exposed to them. We cannot assume that people know things. We've got to instead be willing to share with them. I'll give you another example. Um, when we started going to these conferences and stuff like that, I started giving them articles on church leaders. Some of them started getting smart. So they started going on the website by themselves. They subscribed to it. They was getting articles. And eventually, at this time I was a church planner. I wasn't taking a salary from the church. We were just kind of roughing it, man. We were pouring everything into the building and into the musicians and stuff like that. And then one day, I think after we went to a conference, they read some articles. They came back and said, we're gonna form, like a 3-person team, and we're gonna come up with pastor's salary. And they did. They came up with it. I never forget. They came back and they said, "Hey, we're gonna pay you $500 a week," right? And I'm sitting there thinking I'm the richest person in the world. I'm like, "What? 5 a week? Man, that's crazy." Now I look at it, it's like that was $21,000 a year. I was up below the poverty line, right? But to me, it meant the world because I was doing what I loved, and that was the first time that somebody else had said, "Man, look, we recognize what you add to our lives and how important it is and all this kind of stuff like that." And they set my salary at $500 a week, man. And I was the happiest man in the world, man. I was the happiest man in the world. Now, look, don't get no ideas, because if you try to pay me that today, I am going to promptly reject your offer. Okay. But back then, oh my goodness, man, I was so sad. It was amazing. It was a blessing, right? And it is a blessing. I don't care where you are. It is a blessing to receive honor for your labor. It's a blessing. It just really is. Um, but that came from exposure. It came from them looking at research and going like, "Oh, okay, we're paying, this, and this. We got this going out, and but we need to honor, our leader, our pastor, and stuff like that." So my point is this: is that exposure changed everything. When they got a chance to see what else was out there, they had an opportunity to say, "Okay, look, let's see how we ought to operate here." And so what I'm saying to you is you need to expose your team, right? If you need help, you need to expose them to the fact that you need help. Another way you expose people to what's different is opportunity. That's one of the reasons that I think it's important that you allow other people to preach when you're present, that you allow other people to share the pulpit, because it only takes people preaching one time to go like, "Oh my goodness, how does pastor do this every week?" It teaches them a newfound respect for why you set aside time to study and why you need to really be focused on what God's called you to do. It gives them a newfound respect. When you go out of town as a pastor and you assign all of your duties to other people, and then they look back and realize like, dang, they've been doing this by themselves the whole time. Like, it changes everything. But it is, again, here's a bottom line. Please get this, pastor. This is where I think you can find healing if you'll receive it. It is unfair to expect people to operate in what you don't communicate. If they don't know you're tired, why are you expecting them to relieve you? If they don't know you're struggling, I remember standing in a meeting and we talked about, sorry, we had just done this series called Broken. And all these leaders just sharing how, blessed they were. Man, that was so good. Man, that word was good. And I said, well, I went home and cried for a couple hours. I said, because I'm preaching to y'all about how God to heal your brokenness. And I feel broken myself. Right. And at the time I was like, there was such a discontentment in my heart, man. Like, at that time, we were a young church plant. We were probably about 8 months old at that time. And we were fluctuating, between 75 and 50 people every Sunday. And I felt like a complete failure. Like, I was so stuck in um, I don't know, man. I don't know what it was, but it was something about it. I was just like, I ain't doing this right. And I didn't even know what I was supposed to be doing, but I just felt like I wasn't doing it right. And a part of it was just I was so alone at that time and isolated and all that kind of stuff like that. And I was broken. That was something that the Lord would heal in me about a year later. He would begin to heal in me, but I wrestled with that. But I tell you this, when I told my team about it, it changed because they started to see my humanity. And I get it. In the culture we live in, it's a dangerous thing that I'm saying, to show people your humanity, because we got pastors and preachers who use their humanity to excuse their sin. And that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is genuinely letting them see, hey, I'm a person like you. Sometimes I get on that stage, I look like Superman, but this is Clark Kent over here. You know what I'm saying? Like I've got challenges and things of that nature, and I shared it with them. All right. So that's what you want to do. You want to build togetherness on your team. Here's three ways to do it: shared encounters, shared experiences, and shared exposure. All right. Listen, on this podcast, what we want to do is that we want to try to provide value to you every single chance we get, to just make sure that you and the church can move forward, right? And we've got something really special coming up called Research 23. Research 23 is a virtual intensive for pastors and church leaders and believers everywhere. It is a free half a day of training that me and some of my friends who are in ministry and other different places are coming together to offer to you and your team. All you gotta do is pull your team together, and we're gonna jump on screen and we're gonna train them for you in so many different things. We are guaranteeing you that your team will be better because of what happens in the midst of that gathering. All right. To register, just go to Research 23. You can register, you can be a part of it. If you want an even greater experience, join our VIP. And for the VIP, you can get a workbook, you get a research t-shirt, and you get special access to be in a Zoom room with some of our speakers where you can ask questions and really engage with them and get the most out of this experience. All right. So, listen, thank you for enjoying the Church System podcast. Until next time, keep the gears turning.